Anyway, okay, so here we go. um,
I'm ready.
yeah. So I'm thinking first we have to talk about the mentorship program because that's like how we've met. I was lucky enough to get into the last session, and I guess I just want viewers to kind of hear a little bit more about why you started the mentorship program. I know that you started sort of in the midst of the pandemic, and so what kind of sparked that idea and for you to kickstart that program?
Yeah, I've been playing with different ideas over the years. So it's like, do I want to just start a little painting school in my studio? Like ways that, like we talked about in the program, you have to be your own patron most of the time as an artist. Most big artists are teachers or they have side hustles. It's like you have to find ways to survive in the art world to keep going and to make the journey long rather than short and burning out and giving up. And so I've always been playing with little ideas. What could I do that's art focused to be a patron, but that also gives back in the art world, because I really do believe in giving back to all the people that invested in me for art. But as far as the art journey and the art like life and finding success in the art world, like there's no blueprint, none.
Yeah.
I've fallen flat on my face so many times doing the wrong things and then learning, well, if somebody would have just told me, I wouldn't have burnt that bridge because I would have known the right thing to do. So I was always playing with, do I just want to teach? What do I want to do? Like teach out of my studio, not at a school. And so I started playing with the idea of doing a mentorship program after I was a part of one in LA through my mentor, Mako Fujimura. And I loved the camaraderie I had with the artists. I enjoyed the mentorship, but the camaraderie with the artists was way bigger to me than the program in its entirety. And so I was like, man, it's so lacking for artists to have community. And so I thought, man, what if I started a mentorship program that could also bring artists together so that they could build relationships outside of the group? But then I could just really share the things that I've learned over the years and studied and tried and failed and put into place that have worked for me. And it took a while to actually do it. I was scared to death. Nobody's going to sign up. Nobody's going to want to listen to me. Sure, I may have a good size Instagram following, but they just like looking at my art. All those fears and things, the resistance, like we talk about, gets in and stops you from actually doing what you should be doing. And my wife kept telling me, do it, Ty, you need to do it. You'd be great at it. And then one of my friends, Jonathan Combs, we were on vacation with Tina's wife, Evie, and I shared the idea with him, and he said, oh my gosh, dude, you have to do it. I would love to be in a program like that if I was an artist. Do it, please. So that's how it started.
Yeah. And I mean, we talk a lot about like how lonely it can be to be an artist because you're just sort of in your studio alone, and your hours will go by and you're not like talking to the outside world, and that's just in like the day to day of being in the studio. But life as an artist can be pretty lonely. And I feel like that's something that I've really gained from the mentorship program, is just like, especially now that it's sort of ended and you've got a new group going, but like I'm still able to like have that network. And when I'm lonely or I've got all that resistance going on and I'm like, I can't do this, what am I doing? This is stupid. I have a network to reach out to that's like comforting to me and is my cheerleader. And I think that just speaks volumes for the mentorship program.
Well, it's a different loneliness, right? Because we have family, have our friends in our network, our community around us that we grab drinks with or do dinners with, but they're not artists.
Right.
If you're not an artist, you don't realize what that loneliness means of having community with other artists, right?
Yeah.
It's you want to talk about your work. Everyone around you that's not an artist is always like, oh, I love that, or that's weird. Why are you doing that? That's interesting. I don't get it. Or they just go, I love it, great piece. And they don't understand what it means when you sell a piece, what that does inside, like that joy and that excitement of, oh my gosh, I just sold a work of art. Somebody loved my work enough to invest their own money into it and hang it in their house. Like there's a feeling there that you can't express unless you're telling another artist about it. They know what that feels like. The same thing with, I just got into a show. And your husband or wife are excited for you, but they don't really get what that does. Like my work is going in a show, or a gallery just messaged me, and having that community of artists like brings it all together and makes
Yeah.
that and so full and rich that yeah, we have to have those relationships to go. I got turned down 25 times last month at residencies.
Mhm.
Oh, I hate it. And that artist goes, I know what you mean, man. I know exactly how you feel. And then you go,
Yeah.
I just got into a residency program, and they're celebrating with you. Like, it's
Right.
huge.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, especially like in those moments where you're just like this week, Shelby, Fabi, and I are like, I reach out to them because I'm like, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? Am I going the right direction? All of these questions. And like Shelby's such a big picture person too. And so she's able to like relate to that feeling to just kind of say, like, no, take it back a step, like just focus on the baby steps. Like it doesn't have to be this like giant, oh my God, I'm never gonna make it type of scenario. So yeah, I mean that support network is everything. But yeah, that's awesome. So a few questions from Instagram this past week that people sent just kind of as like general questions that they wanted me to ask, and I figure what a great person to ask than you. So I think like as far as we're just looking at your studio and your office right now, so as far as creating like a physical environment that like nurtures your creativity, what does that look like for you, and what do you do to like set that space up, especially because you've just kind of gotten into a new studio? So how did you set that up to sort of foster creativity?
I mean, I've always said in the past that you can create wherever you are. And I do believe that. Like it doesn't matter where you are. If you want to be an artist and create and find a way into the art world, whatever that fit or that avenue may be for you, you have to create. So you have to create a space where you're able to do that freely. It could be a bedroom, it could be a bathroom, it could be a garage, it could be plain air on the porch. It doesn't matter. Like you just need to be making art, period. And but the space does dictate what you create a lot of times. And I've always been the guy painted in garages for a long, long time. And I've always been the person that I've heard artists complain about space. I don't have space. I'm like, dude, just make freaking art. Just use your space. And then I built not my dream studio, but I built a studio from the ground up on property when we left Austin to Waco, where it was cheaper to live and we could do some more things art wise that I couldn't do in Austin because of price. And it was amazing. I was creating the best work I've ever created. It was big, it had lots of light, had natural light, but then we had to sell it at the beginning of the pandemic because we didn't know what was going to happen. We were like, let's be smart. Let's sell our house. Let's sell the studio and property. Let's pay off debt just in case the world
Yeah.
is crushed and we have to figure out how to live. And then I
Yeah.
ended up in a small condo with a shitty, dark basement type garage. And it took me 4 months to actually paint after we moved in. I couldn't, it was
No
so
way.
dark. It was so opposite of where I was. And every time I get to that door and open it, resistance would just kick me in the ass. And
Yeah.
oh, so frustrated. And finally one day I had to start making work. I had to get off the couch. I had to like get back into it. I had a perfect routine in my own place and my routine was interrupted. And it took a while to get back into it. But that freaking Andy Warhol quote that I hang in my studio, just make art, just make more art. I just heard Andy in the background, with his arms folded and just sitting in the corner saying, just make more art, just make art. Who
Yeah.
cares where you are? And so space does dictate what you create, you know what I mean? But you
Mhm.
can still create. And
Yeah.
that creating in the time that sucks and that is difficult sets you up for the next space where you have a little more freedom and a little more life and joy in a space. Trust
Yeah.
the working, the head down always leads to something down the road. Always.
Yeah, so true. And just like I have my fairly large garage. It's not that big, but
Yeah.
I have a garage, big space. I can kind of that freedom of like movement and not worrying about getting paint everywhere. And then when I spend time in the Bay Area and I'm sort of stuck in an apartment that's really small, I'm like, oh, I need to paint. But I only have this like small area. I can't get paint everywhere. So what do I do? And I think it's a good exercise to just sort of say to yourself,
Absolutely.
okay, I only have this much space. maybe I do some work on paper that's, 9 by 12, or maybe you just kind of make do with what you have. And as long as you continue to flex that creative muscle, I think something comes of it.
Yeah, Chuck Close, inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just go to work every day.
Yes.
That means on a sketch pad,
So
if that means
true.
on a watercolor pad, if that means on a big canvas, like as long as you're working, it'll lead to something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know that we've talked about this before, and I think you have some good advice for it. But as far as like when you hit roadblocks or you find yourself struggling, not just with like resistance, but you're sort of like, oh, what do I do next? Where do you turn for inspiration? Because I know that you seem to not really hit those roadblocks quite as frequently as I do. So I just wonder, what do you do to get inspired to kind of move to that next level?
Yeah, I think, like you said, I think it's this youth to maturity thing. It's like, it's easy when you're younger and you're just starting out and creating to hit roadblocks, which I don't really believe in those, but I do know they exist for people. And it's like, you know, you don't feel like creating or you don't know where you're going. Like I've learned to like, there's so many other things that I love. I'm constantly reading fiction, nonfiction, like constantly reading books. I'm constantly watching films. I do a lot of video editing and things like that. So I can create little short films, produced a movie a couple years ago. So it's like, I find avenues that at least keep my mind going creatively, but it allows me to step out of like the zone I was in that I'm not in anymore, right? Painting.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's a nature walk. Like sometimes that's going hiking in Cameron Park and doing a 3 or 4 mile hike and getting outside or driving by the lake or just laying down outside and looking at the sky. Like we need those things that like feed our soul,
Totally.
because being in the studio alone in solitude and constantly looking at your own work, that's a lot of opportunity to get in your own head. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That's a lot of opportunity for you to damage yourself mentally because you're the one that's battling yourself every day in the studio. So just breath of fresh air, whatever that may be, writing poetry, reading
Yeah.
a book, studying art, taking a road trip. Like there's just things that I've found that help me so that I don't hit moments where I don't want to make art, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I remember one of the first times we talked about like, I feel like I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I like filmmaking, I like photography. Like there's other avenues than just painting that I really enjoy. I wonder what advice you have for other artists that also love documentary filmmaking and photography and stuff, and have been told to sort of like pick one path, but you don't want to avoid the other things that you love that are creative endeavors. So, what advice do you have for artists that want to do lots of different, mediums?
I mean, it's good to find one that you focus on, right? That takes the majority of your time and discipline and routine. So, since for us as painters, if it's painting, spend the majority of your time studying, practicing, playing, experimenting, building that, but don't neglect the other things. Like, we can't do them all, right? Like, it took me 10 years to write my first novel because it was in chunks. I couldn't just sit with my butt in chair, as Anne Lamott said, every day and just write because I'm trying to build an art career, you know? And then here I'm building an art career, and then I have an opportunity to produce a documentary film. So, I was like, yeah, I'd love to be a Julian Schnabel someday. So let me jump into the film world too that I love. And so started working on film. And in the meantime, in those moments where I'm like really struggling with the way that things are happening on canvas, I would go sit down at the computer and I would write 20,000 words, you know what I mean? Or re-edit or do things. And then, that would bring me back in, as I'm focusing on a whole nother story, it brings me back into things that I can do in the studio, and it just keeps life fresh as well,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. At what point do you feel like you've made it? Or like first, how would you define success? And then at what point do you think you would have quote unquote made it?
You know, that's a really hard conversation because obviously that's different for everybody.
Yeah.
Um, think I just read this week, Jerry Saltz was talking about making it doesn't mean you're rich in the art world. Making it means you're able to do what you love to do and get by, and I think for an artist, I mean, we talked about this all the time, like how many extremely wealthy artists can you name, right, on both hands? Like just start going through the number of artists who are millionaires, billion,
Yeah.
whatever, who are museum artists. Like it's a rare thing. It's a very small percentage of artists that get to the Damien Hirst, the Jeff Koons level, like where they're just making tons of money and going around on yachts and private jets all the time. Like that's
Yeah.
a pipe dream for most of us. And so it's like, for me, making it just means I can support myself by creating art. I can continue to paint and create and get my work out in the world. And I'm able to live my life that way without having to do 10 side hustles and things,
Yeah.
which I would do anyways.
Yeah.
But it's making it for me is taking all the other things I had to do to create art and getting rid of one, getting rid of two, getting rid of three,
Right.
getting rid of four. And finally, it's just art stuff. To
Yeah.
me, that's making, because I'm for art's sake. Like I want to make art for art's sake. I don't want to make art to be wealthy. I don't want to make
Yeah.
art to buy the big house or to buy a fancy car. I drive a Honda Element with 180,000 miles on it that's ready to die. It's paid
Yeah.
off. And I can fit a lot of art in it. I don't care. So it's like, I'm creating art to just get better as an artist. And hopefully someday that means something, maybe when I'm gone. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's my
Yeah.
goal, is to keep getting better and make paintings that hopefully someday are great paintings. I have a goal to get there someday. So
I mean, I totally agree. I think I feel the same way. I don't talk to very many artists that are like, oh yeah, I do this for the money. And I think that's like very rare if there's anybody who's doing it for that.
we read about those artists and we watch
Yeah.
the movies on those artists.
Exactly.
So like in the back of our head, it's kind of, if you're raised paying attention to art, that you could be that person. And then
Yeah.
you get into the world and you're like, I'm never going to be that person.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, and that goes back to this book I'm reading. I forget I'm blanking on the writer's name, but he talks a lot about the art market and the market in New York. And like, if you don't get into the market fast enough in New York, then you have a very rare chance of like being that superstar artist. And I mean, it's a tough, like from a business standpoint, it's like a tough market to enter. And it's interesting because there's so many artists around the world making art for art's sake, like you said, and yet only a fraction of them really have international recognition. It's just tough.
It's very hard. Yep. But there's so
Yeah.
much joy in it when you get to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, as long as you're like, I think because you're a little bit like me, you have that sort of like business mindset on the side of your artistic life. And I think sometimes that can get in the way, at least for me, just thinking like, oh, like you start getting a little bit stuck on like selling stuff or like the business aspects of it. But the reality is like you do the art because you love doing it. And like in the act of creating is like the world just like disappears when I'm in the studio, and that's what matters. Yeah. So okay, this is a question I ask everyone because I just always find it really interesting. But what did you want to be when you were younger and why?
Yep. So I literally am doing what I wanted to do when I was younger. So I had three big goals really when I was younger. One was to play basketball. The other one was to be an artist. And the third was to be a writer. Like those were like my big dreams. I grew up in a sports family and I grew up in an arts family. So I had a grandfather that I played sports with every chance I had when I was around him. And I had a grandfather who loved sports, but wrote poetry and taught me about art and invested in me by teaching me about art and the art world and art things, because my mom's oldest brother was a world-renowned sculptor and raku artist. And so that influence in the family, my grandfather just had this passion for culture and the arts and music. And so those are the three things that I wanted to do and wanted to be. and they were always a part of everything I did from when I was little all the way through college, playing basketball in college and being an art major until after. And so not an easy road to get there on any of those accounts.
Yeah.
Because after basketball ended for me, I was like, what the hell do I do?
Yeah.
Um, and because I was on a basketball scholarship in college, yeah, I was an art major, but I had to miss so much for games and trips and travel and things like that, that I didn't truly invest as much as I could have in the school and in some of my professors who are friends of mine today. Later on, I've gone back to them and said,
Mm.
invest in me because I didn't invest in school. So, um, and so, those are the things I wanted to do. And I don't know, I have that mindset of like, I'm going to pursue it until it takes me to the ground, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I have the same type of mind. That's that determination, you know?
Yeah.
But I mean, I wonder for, folks that are out there, what advice do you have for making the transition from basketball into art or into anything else, really, that leap that you have to make for yourself in a career? Like, what advice do you have for people that are trying to do that are trying to make a shift from whatever they're doing currently to maybe the art world or any sort of creative, more passion filled life? I feel like that transition is so hard. I mean, it took me like 5 years at
Yeah.
least, and I'm still like working through it. But like, yeah, what advice do you have for
Well,
folks that trying to make the leap?
for most people, like some people just have the talent to jump right in and be successful in something. And that's a very small percentage. But for most people, you're gonna have to find a way to support yourself doing that. You know what I mean? If that means you're leaving a full-time job and you have to be a barista part-time for a while you're, trying to go into writing or dance or photography, drama, whatever it is, or art, you're probably going to have to support yourself still. Um,
Yeah.
and so it's, you know, you have to try, you have to take a risk, or else you're going to be, 60 years old and wishing that when you were 30, you at least would have tried, and even if you failed, at least, getting older, hey, I tried to do it. Because it's slow. It's a slow burn.
Yeah.
Life is fast, but trying to be a full-time artist is a slow journey.
Hmm.
It's not easy. Like, I'm jumping right in. I'm going to be in galleries. Things are going to go well. I'm going to support myself. Doesn't work that way. Doesn't.
Yeah.
There's too many artists and too few of things to be pulled into and out of. And we're fortunate up today that technology has advanced so rapidly that artists can make livings on their own, selling through their website, selling on Instagram, doing things that can make money rather than just being old school, the old school way of just knocking on doors and going to shows and meeting galleries and curators and artists and grinding it out for years in the scene until hopefully your work gets noticed. There are ways to get noticed today that haven't existed even 5 to 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And at the end of the day, it's about the work. It's about
Mm.
the work. If you want to be a filmmaker, you got to spend time behind the lens and writing and creating and developing your story to tell the story well for somebody to watch. Like, you can't just go outside with the camera and start filming and, think magic's going to happen. Same
Yeah.
thing with art. You got to do the work. You got to get better. You have to study, learn, practice, take yourself to school in the studio. Because at the end of the day, doesn't matter how cool of a person you are, if your work's not at the level that somebody is going to invest in, then
Hmm.
you're just throwing stuff to the wind and hoping something catches.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember a few years ago, I like had a complete breakdown, and I was just like, me, I cry all the time. So I was just like bawling my eyes out and talking to my family. And I just remember saying, like, and it was before I was really even painting, but like, I just remember being like, the things I want to do in life, like artistic endeavors, painting, film, take a lifetime to become exceptional at, or to become recognized if you ever even sort of make it to that point. But like, I just remember feeling so overwhelmed by that feeling that it would just take me forever, that I couldn't get past it. And it took a while to just sort of like, you feel like you're sort of banging your head against a wall, but it's like you just got to make like one step after another, baby steps. And, eventually you'll feel comfortable with where you're at and staying in like the present moment.
Well, and that's the resistance of it. That's what
Yeah.
in The War of Art, when Pressfield says in the beginning of the book, he says it's so easy to have this vision in the stream and keep telling yourself you'll get to it tomorrow. That
Hmm.
I'll be ready next week. I'll be ready next month. I'm not ready yet. Maybe I'll be ready next year. That's
Yeah.
just resistance because, we can tell ourselves that for years and never actually get to it. So it's like, no,
Yeah.
let's take a chance. Let's take a risk and do it.
Yeah, and it's like I forget what the quote is, but you have to be brave enough to sort of suck at something, at first,
Yeah,
and
that's great. Yeah.
you'll get better at it throughout the years. And I think I look back at like the first time I picked up a paintbrush and like the first thing I painted, and just like it feels good to recognize that, like, okay, yeah, that was terrible paintings, but I was brave enough to pick it up, to move forward, to continue, and to not put it down.
That's why I have this up in my studio right when I walk in every day. I read the Andy Warhol quote: "Don't think about
Yes.
making art, get it done. Let everyone else decide if it's good or bad, whether they love it or hate it. While they're deciding, make even more art."
Yep, I
So
love that
every
quote.
day, every day when I walk in the studio, it's right there, and I see it, and I just make art.
Yeah, that's good advice. Like putting up, quotes or some sort of inspiration that when you walk in, and that's something that we kind of talked about. It's like whatever's outside of the studio, leave it. When you walk into the studio, you are your, painter persona, and like whatever you need to like be inspired should be right there in front of you.
Well,
Yeah.
I think I had somebody, I can't remember, it was the first or second session of the program where I told them to put a note on the outside of their studio door that says, get out of your way.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
every day they get out of the studio, they read like, get out of my way. And they walk
Yeah.
in because they continue to
Seriously.
get in their own way every time they painted,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I should do that because I definitely get in my own way. So I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask so everybody else can hear it. But who are some major influences? Painters or family members, just major influences in your art.
I mean, the list is so long, it's insane. But I'll stick with art rather than going into writing and music and all that. But my uncle, number one, Conway Pearson, who I didn't know well because he was 24 years older than my mom, and then he passed when I was young.
Hmm.
So I was probably only physically around him maybe 4 or 5 times when I was younger. Um, but he looked like an artist, right? He had the big gray beard, had kind of a shirt, button down shirt that was old, that was kind of see through in spots, with just jeans with clay and patina on them, and he fit the mold. When I saw him, I was like, yeah, that's an artist. I know Uncle Jigs is an artist. It's what he does. But I think it's a DNA thing that he's always been in my blood. He's always been in my studio with me, like looking over me, like watching. And then my high school art teachers, Mario Ferrante, Toby Kovich, and Kim Morgan, were so crucial and important to me in high school because I was I was balancing the athlete side of me with the art side of me, which means in high school, completely opposite groups of friends, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a idiotic division that exists, but it does exist.
Hmm.
And they were so crucial in helping me. Like, you have something, and Mario used to always tell me, once you start letting go, you're going to be a great artist. Because everything I did was portraiture, figurative, still life, realism. I wanted to make everything as real as I could with the pencil. And he said, once you start painting and you start learning how to let go and lose control when you work, you're going to be a great painter. I didn't do that till
Hmm.
college. So those three teachers were monumental in just feeding into me and encouraging me. And then an art professor in college, William Catling, who I think is one of the greatest American sculptors in the last 20 years. He's absolutely brilliant. Um, Even though I didn't pay attention and even though I didn't care, he still fed into me. And after school, I would always tell him, even though you don't know you're a mentor because I watch and I listen to everything you do. And I've spent time going out and talking to him about the career taking the risk and taking the chance. Those are like, and then Mako Fujimura, of course, who's a more recent mentor, just his wisdom and knowledge and just spiritual depth that has fed into me over the last few years has been incredible. And those are personal, right? Those are the ones where I can touch them and feel them and see them. But outside of that, Basquiat is what made me want to be an artist in college.
I knew you would
like,
say that one.
that was my goal, but it was like the
Yeah.
art star that in art school, when we first learned about art stars, there's something magnetic about it. And it wasn't long after the Julian Schnabel film came out, the Basquiat film, and the soundtrack I listened to every day, and I dressed like him, I acted like him. I used to do graffiti with chalk around campus and in the art buildings, and I wanted to be Samo. And so that just led into later, after basketball ended and life started, I just started studying art and really researching it. And that's when I found the Julian Schnabels and the Cy Twombly's, Antoni Tapes, Joan Mitchell, Helen Frankenthaler. All the Ninth Street women are very big influences because they are part of the core that created the genre that I exist in, which would be abstract expressionism to neo-expressionism and mark making. I mean, there are plenty of artists that are working today, like the Jason Craigheads, the V Nodes and Austin, who's a good friend of mine, that I've followed their journeys, Jenny Brunzinski in Germany, that are just fabulous artists that I just follow, and just watch everything they do. Johnny Cheatwood in LA, they're fabulous people, fabulous artists, and they're having a pretty, what you would consider success as an artist. You're showing work, people are buying your work, and you're able to keep painting tomorrow because of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, for emerging artists who, like, you've grown up with an art network around you pretty much your whole life. And I guess for folks who are just kind of entering art and kind of finding their way, what advice do you have for emerging artists that are looking for that network and that mentorship and that guidance? Obviously they can apply to your mentorship program, or, just kind of what advice do you have for them?
I mean, you have to get to know artists somehow. You have to have a network of artists. It's crucial to your growth. And I think you have to study art. A lot of young artists go, I'm not going to study art history. I'm not going to look at too much art because I don't want to influence my work. I'm like, well, then you're going to suck as an artist. You're going to be a really shitty artist because you're only going to be as good as what you know and who you are. And if you don't know enough and you haven't learned enough, then you're not going to be very good. So study as much as you can, look at as much work as you can, copy the techniques as many artists as you can, get in the studio. And I tell my mentees all the time, when you're in your studio, you're at school, you're teaching yourself. How in the world did they do that brushstroke? How did Joan Mitchell's gestures work like that? Practice it. If you love that art and that's the art that speaks to you and you want to paint like that, practice it. You can't just, you can't figure it out on your own, especially for an artist that didn't go to art school and learn certain techniques and learn things. You don't have to go to art school. It helps with the foundations of color and form and texture and light and those things, but it doesn't teach you how to be an artist later. It teaches you things you need as an artist. You can do that on YouTube every day. I do it all the time. I look at stuff on YouTube and I practice. How do they mix these paints? How do they use pigments? I do it. I'm at school every day. And so, but man, Instagram has just been such an incredible place to meet artists. Like find artists that you like that are at the similar level as you, right? Like if you're just starting to try and make friends with artists who are at a different level than you, they have so many people reaching out to them. Like they may say, sure, let's talk, let's be friends, let's all answer your questions, but find artists at the same level as you, build a relationship. What's working for you? Oh man, that work looks great. Hey, that work looks like it struggled last week. Like you can build those relationships and then take a freaking trip and meet them. If you're in LA and you meet an artist in New York at your level, figure out a way to meet in the middle. Like go grab coffee. I know Dana James from New York did a residency here in Texas before the pandemic, and I saw that she was out here. So I hit Dana up and was like, oh my gosh, you're in Corsicana. We need to grab lunch. She's like, yes, come over. And so I went and spent the day with Dana at Corsicana at a residency, and we grabbed barbecue and just talked art and life. But those are the things that you need as a young artist to develop relationships, but you need to learn how to talk about art too, because that's so
Yeah.
important. You need to learn how
Yeah.
to talk about your art, talk about the art world, talk about things with confidence, so that if you get the opportunity to show your work or to share your work with somebody, you can talk about it. Where did it come from? What style is it? What genre are you from? Who inspired you to get there? People don't realize that curators and dealers and gallery owners, like, that sounds impressive when an artist knows their stuff rather than, I just painted it in my studio. Yeah, these were
Right.
cool.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's like a big focus I feel like that we focused on because I was so interested in minimalism. And although we haven't necessarily defined what I've been doing lately as minimalism, but to learn about that era and to learn about those artists and to learn about how the theory behind it and to see the ways in which people wrote about minimalism, I think is so helpful when it comes to like talking about art and, from any area, you just sort of pick, what you want to focus on or what you want to learn about and kind of dive into it, as deep as you can. And like, yeah, the YouTube videos and watching people paint on YouTube has been so helpful for me, just like different techniques that they use. And yeah, creating sort of channels on YouTube for that is great.
Yep.
So are there any societal or cultural influences that you kind of use when you're creating or that influence you in your creations, or like anything kind of from the outside world that you take in?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because the series I'm working on right now is something I started kind of playing with in the studio, I guess 2 years ago. Just doing my own relief prints by painting on cardboard, and then creating a relief print by pressing it to the canvas. Um, and yesterday when I was working, all of a sudden I went, oh my gosh, this is coming from the time when Mandy and I lived in China. And we used to spend a lot of time in the markets buying art for family back home. And I'd go hang out with like the Chinese calligraphists and relief artists who would do the big banners and the big, print stuff. And I was like, this one piece I did yesterday looks just like a
Mhm.
piece that I saw in China 14 years ago when we were living in Xi'an.
Wow. That's
And I went,
awesome.
oh my gosh. And then I looked at both pieces and I was like, oh my gosh, there's similarities in the way they would, even though I'm not painting landscape, like there's similarities in the way they would paint a mountainside in ink and then have the scrolling, the Mandarin letter characters going up and down on the sheet.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh my gosh, even though what I'm doing is totally abstract, like that is in my subconscious, that feel, the
Yeah.
balance, of those pieces. And so I had never thought about that at all before until literally yesterday when I was
Wow.
working on it. And it caused me to
Cool.
just stop. It just caused me to stop. And then I was thinking about those memories in the markets in Xi'an and and then I was like, oh my gosh, how did that come out? It's just one of those things in art that there's so much in our subconscious that it
Yeah.
informs how to do things. That's why we
Yeah.
need to study, look a lot, always look as an artist,
Yeah.
because the subconscious will inform you of what works and what doesn't the more you've looked at things and studied them.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's like whatever you're absorbing right now in the moment may not actually be used right now in the moment. But like you said, 10 years, 14 years down the line, you could use it and be like, oh wow, wait a second. Like I totally absorbed that knowledge from like a decade ago. Yeah, I'm totally just in awe of how the subconscious works in the creative process. And
Crazy.
yeah, it's just mind blowing. No pun intended. So do you feel like oftentimes I feel like conflict is necessary for me to create. I almost feel like shit has to be hitting the fan for me to like come out with awesome ideas and awesome creations because I have to be like in that low. And I don't know, I kind of draw inspiration from that, which I don't necessarily think is a healthy way to create. But do you feel like conflict or suffering are necessary for creating?
No, I used to. I don't anymore. My life is very different than it used to be 20, 30 years ago when I did battle with depression and I did battle with, really difficult things and working through childhood trauma and things that really affected that depression and those things later in life. And I used to bask in it. Like, you know what I mean? Like to this day, I mean, I love sad music more than I like happy music.
Yeah.
I love classical and jazz, and I love the more somber numbers than I do the happy numbers. I love really heavy film. My wife
Mm,
hates it. She's like, "Oh, how are you watching this?" I love books that are thick and heavy and have, but I've learned that it's very easy for me to go there, right? In my character, in my personality, I can go to those places very easily. And so
mm,
I've learned over the years how to really care for my soul and myself in a way that I don't live there, right? That I can still find joy in those moments, which is a
mm,
weird thing, but you can, because they're basically based on deep story more than anything. But I don't live there, which I used to. And I found ways, routine wise, to work in the studio no matter what. Not wait for the moments when I'm sad or there's conflict, but I can paint just as well as I'm happy and freaking, on cloud 10 of joy of life as I can as, a family member just passed
mm.
and life sucks horribly. Like I can paint the same today. And I think
Yeah.
that's just really spending time building routine and discipline in creating, um, and realizing that yeah, the work may change and the work may have different effects, but the work in essence is still the same work because I'm the person creating it.
Mm.
And so, you
And maybe a
know,
little bit of it is like confidence too. Just like
yeah, no,
when your
absolutely.
confidence increases, you don't feel like you have to be in that low point in order to create.
That
Like you
comes
can
with
just always.
more, that comes with creating more and more and more work. Like that comes
Yeah.
in the state of having done a lot of work and able to look back on it and know where you're going to. When you're just trying to find where you're going, it
Mm.
gets a little difficult sometimes because you tend to get lost and then you tend to wait for the inspiration or the down moment to go express things like that. I think it's just a growing up thing in, as
Yeah.
an artist, just a getting older in life and getting older in the studio as well.
Yeah. Okay, so two last questions.
Yep.
One, do you believe you have a signature style and how did you arrive at that signature style? This is a question from Instagram. We will just start with that.
Yeah, I mean, eh, most people that follow my work or that saw my work, say, I can see Tiny Nathan Clark in each of the pieces. I think I'm still trying to find my signature style because I started out doing crazy, wild, weird, abstract figures, in high school and college. And then I fell in love with street art. So I was doing street art pieces for a long time and big stencils and things. And then that led me to what I really love, which was ABEX work, abstract expressionism, and just being a poet on canvas. And obviously my influences from Cy Twombly to Mitchell to Tapez to, I mean, you can see the influences in my work. And yeah, I think it's leading me towards my style, but I'm taking a break from like painting with my hands and brushes right now, and I'm
Mhm.
doing relief printing because I loved when I was mixing it with my painting, and I'm just going to do a bunch of relief, or I'm still painting on something, but I'm now creating a relief of it on the canvas from what I paint on. But it's very different, but I feel like it's allowed me to step away from some frustrations on some pieces. The paintings I was working on that are more sculptural paintings with a lot of thickness of bundled canvas on them, I really was having some frustration. It wasn't working the way I wanted to. So I'd step back, doing something totally different that I think it still has bits and pieces of me in it.
Mhm.
I think people have seen that. But every artist's works has this 10-year shift in work. You
Yeah.
look at any work, you look at their work when they're 20, their work when they're 30, their work when they're 40, they're 50. It's just like our personal style as we get older. We start off nerdy and goofy, and then we have, if you're a boy, you have like a jock stage, and then maybe you have a punk rock stage, and you have a skater stage, and then like I had all those stages. So it's almost like art shifts with our,
Yeah.
maybe in high school, dye our hair blue. And then all of a
Mhm.
sudden we become really preppy in college. And it's like, can't believe I dyed my, we have these shifts in life. And I think that affects the shifts in our work as well.
Totally. Yeah. And like, I think, I mean, I don't see this yet in mine. I've been painting long enough, but from other artists that I've seen that have kind of been painting for decades, you start to see the little hints that they've taken with them throughout the decades, and that sort of ends up defining their work and their signature style.
Yep. I think I'm still on that journey.
Yeah, yeah. We all will be until we're, super
Yeah,
old and
absolutely.
on our way out. Okay, so last question. Obviously, we've given a lot of advice and just sort of opinions, but if there's one takeaway, one piece of advice for emerging artists that you would give, what would that be?
Study your ass off. Like spend time in the books, spend time going and looking at art. Go to every gallery near you, go to every museum near you, take a notebook, make notes, but go look at art. Go hang out with your peers, man. Like that, even though they're dead and their art's hanging on the wall, they're still your peers, right?
Yeah.
They were 27 at one time too. They were 35 at one time as well, painting that painting. So at some point that artist was your age, thinking the same exact things you were thinking, frustration, excitement, whatever in the studio. They had a moment that's the exact moment you're having. They went and
Hmm.
looked at art at museums the same way you're looking at their painting in a museum. Go look at as much art as you can, make notes about it, and then go in the studio and freaking make a shit ton of art. Like make a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah. I think
The
if you
world
can
needs.
see, yeah, 100%. And I feel like if you can see art in person, we tend to get like so bogged down in technology and viewing it online and on screens. I think to be able to go, if you can, in person is just changes your outlook completely. You can
Yep,
look at the texture, you can look
absolutely.
deeply at it, you can see it in a, museum or amongst other pieces, and that just changes your whole mindset and
Yep,
perception. Cool.
absolutely.
Actually, I lied. I have one other question for you. So it's so funny because I've had like two people on Instagram lately reach out about how exhausting it is to be in the studio for like hours at a time. Like our back hurts and we're just like,
Uh,
like, at the end of it, you're just like, you want to sit on your couch and like not move because, and I'm not even that old, but but what do you do to like stay in shape and make sure you don't break your back?
yeah, literally yesterday I couldn't walk when I got home. My back was so tight. Or because I'm on my hands and knees, like, pushing cart, and I had my pieces set awkwardly. So I was really reaching across them and like doing weird angles, which was stupid because I'm older and I have issues. So, but no, but I do stay in shape. I eat really healthy. I eat really clean. I do believe that, you know, physical and mental and spiritual things are so important for artists. And I exercise, I do weights, I stretch, I walk. I think, and Mako Fujimura talks about this all the time. Like, you need to be physically,
Yeah.
healthy as well as mentally healthy, like in order to create your best work. Because
Yeah.
if you're physically unhealthy, it's going to affect you in the studio.
Hmm.
You're going to get sick more. Your immune system's going to be lower. Or I'm not saying you have to exercise all the time, but take care of yourself,
Yeah.
because that also affects your mental capacity and it affects the long journey. You want to
Yeah.
be in this for the long game. Not You don't want to burn out physically, because if you burn out physically, you're burning out mentally.
Right.
So it's like, so I definitely do things. I was at the gym before I got on the call with you because I knew I had to fit it in sometime today.
Yeah.
um so
That's
yeah.
funny. I played tennis before our call.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I
But
think I'm gonna put a
yeah,
pickleball court. I think I'm gonna put a pickleball court in the back half of my studio.
everybody is playing
Oh,
pickleball. Like, am I
I love
missing out? I have
it's
to,
old
I'll have to
person's
switch.
yeah.
I know. Like my husband wants to play pickleball. My
I love
parents are playing pickleball now. I'm like, I'm a tennis person, but I guess I have to make the switch.
Buddy and I did our first pickleball tournament a couple months ago in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We went out there and did a
Nice.
pickleball.
That's
Yeah, I love it.
awesome. Very cool. We'll have to play pickleball sometime. Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Ty. I
Of
really, really
course.
appreciate it. Such a
Yep.
good
Always
conversation.
a
I'm
pleasure to hang
excited.
out with you.
Yeah, I'm excited for
We'll hang
everybody
out.
to hear.
Awesome.
Oh, and Larry says bye too.
Larry, we'll see ya.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll talk to you soon. We'll keep in touch.
Okay. Yep. I'll talk to you later,
All
man.
right.
Bye.
Thanks, Ty. Bye.